Alright, my name is Joshua Coleman. I didn't really do any of the work. I just kind of put it together. And I did it, redid it, and did it again. So some of my citations have been done in haste, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm cited wrong or gotten something mixed up. But, alright, let's get started. The topic is anarchy, natural law, and the moral authority. So to begin, I'm going to start with an anecdote that occurred in the Chinese book of history, the Shin Qi, where there was a meeting said to have taken place between the legalist Confucius and the anarchist or anarcho-anachronistic Lao Tzu. Or if anybody knows anything about Confucius, he was big on law and order and morality as servitude to the family and to the state. Beautiful. And Lao Tzu was exactly the opposite. And so, Lao Tzu ends up scolding Confucius for trying in vain to order society. He says that people naturally know how to behave, and a perfect society exists in letting go of trying to order things and allowing people to live contrary to writing down the law and then trying to enforce it. And then after the meeting took place, according to the Summa Qian, Confucius returned to his disciples and said, birds fly, fish swim, and animals run on the earth. What runs can be caught by a trap, what swims by a net, and what flies by an arrow. But I don't know how to catch this man Lao Tzu, who like a dragon rises up to heaven, riding the wind to the clouds. So, in contrast to this, I'm sure we've all heard the old cliche against an anarchistic society about how can we organize a society if anarchism is against organization. And so it goes hand in hand with the common supposition that anarchy is chaos, which is regrettably a woefully productive straw man argument and a logical fallacy as far as I'm concerned. But as exemplified by the anecdote between Lao Tzu and Confucius, we can only hope to achieve perfect harmony through freedom from legalism. The contrary opinion was controversially defended by the eminent philosopher Thomas Aquinas in his work, the Summa Theologiae. He took this position in spite of his statement that the state is nothing but brigands or thieves at large. He still said that the state is better than the alternative of anarchy. Though in his day of the crumbling Roman Empire raiding barbarians and Vikings, I may have been more inclined to believe him. However, today I believe this view is fundamentally flawed. Living in a post-industrial society, more can be accomplished through cooperation than through theft. It would make a far greater deal of sense to go against a small unorganized band of criminals and a large cohesive criminal organization. So in reality, I hope that by the end of this presentation, we'll see that the attack on anarchy is nothing more than a criticism of the state itself. I will here endeavor to show that this is precisely the case, that the state has applied its description to that of the anarchist model in the most successful application of doublespeak, where we are to believe that war is peace and that peace is chaos. So then let the adages be slew. If anarchism is not chaos, then what is it, and how does it leave room for law? Well, I hope to arrive at the conclusion that such a question is redundant, and not only that is there room for a law in an anarchist society, but it is only possible to recognize law in a free society. Let me begin with an illustration. I feel right off the bat I'm going to go ahead and give a disclaimer that all anarchists may not believe this, but for the natural law theory and for the claim that anarchists don't believe in law, I'm just providing this as a counterexample. So then anarchy is like a vacuum, and when I say a vacuum, I mean it's a lack of artificial and external intervention. So by following this definition of the vacuum, I mean that it is in the vacuum of prehistoric Earth that man was allowed to evolve. By this I mean that there is no star or union of mammals or amphibians which impose law upon the universe. It was not the oppression of outside forces and impositions alone, that only by way of this vacuum that the miracles of consciousness and thought have occurred. Therefore, I propose that the definition of this void is anarchy, and that the void of the anarchist societies return to such a model, living in harmony with the universe. However, I do not want to be misconstrued as romanticizing the prehistoric epoch, rather I'm arguing from authority of the evolutionary theory. As every man must get his authority from somewhere, and by this authority I mean, as Bakunin said, in God and the state, that for anything relating to shoes I refer to the authority of the shoemaker, and in this I subsequently refer to the authority of the universe and to nature, consulting in how we ought to live. To emphasize this with a real-world example, in the inheritor of the Zapatista movement.
Yep.
The subcomandante Marcos of the EZLN from a 1994 interview at CBS in 60 Minutes explained that the goal of the movement is to get the forces of coercion out of the way so that the people can live peacefully and prosperously. Yeah, it's a little late. So anarchy is the process by which natural order of the universe occurs. Anarchy is therefore the most conducive means by which we may secure the march of evolution that is beneficial to humanity and conducive to freedom. Being consistent with this definition, I make the further proposition that it is by anarchy and anarchy alone that we fulfill law among all truths and morality. So what is law, and where does it get its authority? Here I will consult again the grandfather of anarchism, Bakunin, and do as he did in consulting the realm of science, that impartial beacon of truth championed by man. Based upon explanations to follow, let us say that a scientific description of law is a cohesive set of observations that describe how the universe works. Dictionary.com explains it as a statement of a relation or sequences of phenomena invariable under the same conditions. For example, this is how we get our laws of physics and logic and so on. These are descriptions of how the universe works, and not of man's impositions upon the universe. This distinction is radically important for us to understand the functions and place of natural law over the legalistic and statist society. For how ridiculous and pointless would it be to dictate to the universe how to arrange the stars by decree? It would get us nowhere, and we would quickly discover the utter madness of it all, so long as we possess the freedom to do so. Thus, by following this description, we can see that law is the natural order of the universe, and for the purpose of its application is to live in accordance with nature. For as Plato said in his acclaimed work, The Republic, that the ideal city is one which lives in accordance with nature. It is not by our own volition that we are men, rather it is according to the laws that make the universe that we are here. And we cannot hope to overtly improve upon the universe, but in the very least to harness the power that brought us here through observation of the natural processes. And humanity, being an integral part of the universe, we should consult science on the way that law applies to man. So how do we decipher the law? Aristotle tells us throughout his work in the Nicomachean Ethics that we can work out a law for living things as a system of ethics. Ethics, in this sense, is whatever is beneficial and furthers the existence or well-being of the living thing. For instance, an ethic for an elm tree would be to give it water, sunlight, and to provide it with such conditions as to avoid blight, fungus, thus furthering the existence and the betterment of the elm. Therefore, these would be considered proper laws for elms, and we know this because it is easily observable and testable. When there is plenty, the elm thrives, and when there is drought or fungus, the elm suffers. And so it is for man. We can thereby work out a successful, wholly observable and testable law, an ethical law for man. This has been referred to many as the natural law or spontaneous order, in which law is the natural process of the universe. So then, what is the good for man? It is that which furthers the life or quality of the individual. And I've already made a distinction here, to which I've alluded to here, and will expound upon further later on. First, we can automatically adapt what can be considered to be given information. That which furthers the life of man, as it is with the elm, can be brought over straight away. Aside from food, water, and shelter being considered by most to be the first laws of human survival, the very next is peace. Thomas Hobbes uses the same basis for his natural law theory in saying that few men can agree on what makes them happy, however they can all agree on what makes them miserable. Violence. Violence possesses an immediate threat to all life everywhere and by no measure raises the quality thereof. Violence can be broadly defined as theft. Theft of life is murder, theft of property is robbery, and so on. All forms of violence can be broadly classified as falling under one of these two categories. Further arguments are made over the definition of property, but we will not go into that here. The action of violence can be seen as violating the natural law because it inhibits man's progress and promotes division. Man cannot progress if he is set back by theft, as his progress is stolen from him, and therefore it cannot be made. So then the purpose of this is to free the individual, every man, you and I, to pursue whatever caprice we may fancy in the mad dash for happiness, so long as we do not harm another. This is because, as we have ethics for an elm tree, they may differ dramatically from that of a crow or a rabbit. The ethical system is worked out on a very specific basis. Then it must follow that because man has consciousness, and unlike any other living being on this planet, that because individual preference varies in the ways to happiness, that only a law that can be recognized is that man has the right to remain free from coercion in his pursuit of happiness. This in turn furthers the evolution of society and how we progress. Individuals can research and experiment, and this is compounded exponentially through the free exchange of ideas. Freedom to pursue all options and strengthens research into every category of science, and thus by natural selection we evolve, absorbing the good and then the bad, the useless or the irrelevant will fade into the background. This is the truth. This is not nihilism, for we can recognize that there is truth. The truth that every man is right in his own perception, and that every man reserves the right to be free from imposition. Little late on my keys. This is the moral authority that we possess in advocating to anarchism. Therefore, we find that anarchy and natural law are not contradictory as permeated by bourgeois society. However, they are mutually dependent and exist in exclusive symbiotic relationship. And furthermore, I would propose that we cannot discover what is best for man unless we are allowed to live in an anarchist society. Since, as mankind, we are the rational animal, and being the only species capable of testing, we must be free to test, free to find the truth, and what it means to us as individuals. Albeit it is not to say it is impossible to discover any truths outside of the free world, only that we would be more apt to discover more truths, and more rapidly the freer society became. And it is as it may be so that the ethics for elms and for apple trees may differ, so then much more dramatically does there exist differences between them. So it is from here that as anarchists we obtain our moral authority. In accordance with the natural law, and in contrast we will perpetually fail to observe the natural progression from the objective perspective of the void, so long as we are under the fog of the state. Therefore, I would like to point out that the negation of anarchy, or statism, which can be synonymous with force, is the retardation of evolution as an agent that imposes outside law upon humanity and hinders that natural law. This is early, but I'll get to that. Statism is at best an honest mistake and attempt to provide order, as Confucius tried, or at worst an intentional attempt to stop the natural progression of the universe for the benefit of the few. Those that declare war, those that hold monopolies on resources, and those that systematically rob the masses violate the conditions necessary for evolution. Even in good intentions we pave the road to hell. Anarchy, however, is faith. It is faith in the ability for man to reason for himself and to live in a peaceful cohabitation. Statism is the ignorance and abuse, the rule of one man imposed upon all and often is arbitrary. This violates the moral code of conduct, inhibiting man to work out a path for himself that statism constitutes an act of aggression. Even in the case of democracy, as long as there is one man who disagrees with the other 99%, there can be no moral justification for taking away the rights of that one man. This is explained succinctly through Kantian ethics and the categorical imperative. In this we can see that the ethics adhered to by man are flagrantly violated by the state and violate natural law. There is only one code of ethics, not one for the individual or not another for the state. Therefore, since murder is wrong, so is war. Theft is wrong, and therefore so is taxation. And this includes all theft, the theft of life, draft, the bailouts, and quantitative easing. Not to mention the lies of the Iraq War, Vietnam, the treatment of the native peoples, and not just in America, but worldwide. And in doing so, it fills the void with false representations of reality. But these statist ideas are innate to the system. They cannot be fixed by replacing one with another, attempting to put order where no order belongs. And they manifest themselves in such ideas as inequality among men, that some have the right to control the lives of others, that the taxed benefit of those who pay the taxes, or that the brown people are enslaved to the behest of the white. Statism encourages division, and it lusts for revenge. These then lead to war and poverty and the unequal distribution of land. A power structure such as the state will breed destruction as the people will fight like tigers in order to subjugate whoever is so unlucky to be squeezed under the boot. It is the state that organizes destruction. It is either guns or butter. And as Lao Tzu tells us in the Tao Te Ching, that where an army has stood, no food grows. These follies are not held up by logic and reason, but are enforced by the club. Where the people may differ, where the people may prefer diplomacy, it is often the will of the state to send children to war. So then it is as Cicero said in his De Legibus, that natural law is what serves to unite humanity, and positive or state law is that which conflicts with this dictum, is no law at all. Henry David Thoreau echoes this point in Civil Disobedience in his protest of slavery in the Mexican-American War, and lived it by refusing to pay his taxes. When the positive law is glorified at the expense of the natural law, and it is attempted to be acted upon, we have misfires, miscalculations, and damnable results as we strain from the natural order. I will attempt to offer a couple more examples of this, but I will not take up too much more of your time.
Get it! Exactly.
Monarch looking at his mouth.
Nazi ass.
These violations of the natural law are sadly not met by jail time, but the consequences are much more dire. Humanity falls short of its next evolutionary leap. Opportunities are missed in which we could have advanced but have now been cut short. What is sad about this is that we will never know what could have been. It is the opportunity cost that we pay for the existence of the state. So it is that we only submit to an immutable and omnipresent law that coaxes humanity to the next stage of evolution. That is the law that we follow as anarchists. It is through the deviations on this law that we are set back, and these setbacks are realized as repression, slavery, suffering, and war. And it is only through the admonition of this law that we succeed in discovering and hopefully fulfilling our purpose in the universe.
I love that last. I ain't gonna lie, I really love that last quote that you had.
Chuang Tzu?
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, Chuang Tzu. He came, I think, a couple hundred years after Lao Tzu. He was the next big Taoist. I don't know what you call it, like inheritor or prophet or something like that.
But are you saying? But he was the successor of who?
Lao Tzu.
And that was the one who was more. Lao Tzu was the one who had different beliefs than Confucius.
Yeah. Confucius was the statist. Lao Tzu was the individualist.
Which makes him sort of just an all-for-profit, which makes him the enemy.
Well, not necessarily though. I mean, if you wanted to twist it that way, I mean, you can find any interpretation you want. But
He's more libertarian-minded, just like as Confucius is.
Well, Confucius isn't so libertarian.
Yeah.
Oh, for real? Yeah. He was landowning?
Yeah.
Nah, I'm not trying to do I'm not even trying to deal with that.
No,
exactly. I'm not trying to do it. Let's continue. But we got that settled, though. We got that settled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lao Tzu,
pretty much in his theories, at least.
Yeah. Lao Tzu used to work for the Chinese state, but he got so disenfranchised by it that he quit to become a philosopher.
It's kind of like a Kropotkin or something.
Yeah.
Or not Kropotkin. Yeah, Kropotkin.
Yeah.
The Tolstoy.
I don't know. I'm sure he had a great following, man.
Yeah.
I'm saying whenever you have it's. I mean, they think of it as just an idea, but it's an idea that's known worldwide just because it comes to you naturally.
Right.
Anarchism comes to you naturally because it's what is good.
Right. Exactly.
Aristotle.
Yeah. If
Exactly.
you listen, I mean, if you really listen to yourself and you listen to the universe, it's easy to find. I mean, unless you just are twisted and you like to hurt people.
Yeah.
And the proof of it is that the state has to back up their proposition with guns. If it came naturally, no guns would be necessary.
Exactly. Well, hey, there's mental weapons too, man. I ain't gonna lie about that.
Yeah, sure.
Let's go ahead.
Okay. And then Cicero. I got a little bit more about how the state flagrantly violates natural law. And then we got the common argument used by the state, whether overtly or covertly, is that it's the will of the people, and that is the problem of the modern nation state. You no longer have divine rule of kings. So I mean, they try to say it's a republic, it's the People's Republic of China, or it's a democratically elected government, so therefore it's justified. Yeah. So and then right away, I mean, even in the philosophical justification, it's not even if they adhered to what they said they did, there's still no justification.
Because there's still a level of power there amongst the people.
Well, even if any one man, this is the categorical imperative, if any one man, if you do something that can't be done universally, like if you lie to somebody, if you universalize it where everybody lied all the time, nothing would ever get done. So by the same philosophy, the state can't exist morally, because if they kill and everybody killed all the time, there'd be nobody left. We'd all be dead. So that's the Kantian way to work out the ethics for man, which kind of just expounds upon the Aristotelian. Thomas Hobbes was a little bit more of a statist. He appealed to natural law as handed down by God, and not really something that exists that's observable and testable.
I never thought of it, but that's true. They define the state as that instrumentality that has the monopoly on power. I mean, on violence. But the state is also that institution that has the monopoly on crime, such as lying and theft.
Yes.
The only way they can lie and thieve is if we don't.
Yes.
Exactly. Because what other way to make it more just acceptable than if it wasn't coming from somewhere more higher above or higher in power?
We're not allowed to really question it. We can't really do anything about it. And commonly, if you talk to most people, they don't want to know. They don't want to talk about it. I mean, they'll get upset. They'll get offended.
They don't want to know.
They don't even know there's anything outside of the two parties.
The truth.
Anything
you want
else
to keep that to yourself.
Anything else is high treason.
It's hard. It's very hard to do that. It's very hard to do that, especially whenever they bring it onto themselves, and then they're not knowing that they're dealing with people like us who really dig for things like this.
Yeah.
And then whenever you try to tell them and stuff, they take such offense to it that they motherfucking. They might fight you.
Yeah.
I'm not playing. I'm like, alright, obviously I'm getting too far into what you can't even handle. I'm gonna step away. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to end up swinging tonight. So
yeah.
I have a question. It's kind of a little bit off topic, but as far as the founding fathers, were they along kind of more with Hobbes? What were they trying to establish whenever they established the Constitution and stuff like that? Because it seems like it was more like a mixture of I guess natural law or what Hobbes wanted, and a mixture of republic or republicanism. I don't know.
I think it was a mixture. Considering the times, I think it was a progression. Even though these people came from all the founding fathers were pretty aristocratic. They're wealthy people. And in the original Constitution, which was actually called the Articles of Confederation, they outlined it to where you can only vote if you are a white landowning male who was Protestant. And I think right there that shows off the bat that it's not completely. They didn't have completely anarchistic intentions anyway.
No.
From the situation they were in though, which was monarchy, it is a progression though. So it is good intentions. It's just not best intentions.
To their train of thought.
Right. Considering the situation that they were in, that they were handed, and considering that they did come from privileged backgrounds, they might not have understood other people's plight and things like that. But at the same time, that's no excuse. At the same time, that's no excuse not to go further. It is a progression. It did enhance a lot of people's freedom, and it did greatly encourage the Industrial Revolution and things like that too.
So is it safe to say that I don't know where this is wrong because I'm just now beginning studying anarchy and stuff like that. Is it safe to say that republicanism is the closest thing to that, or is it still completely two separate
I think
the political system itself, having a political system because regardless of what political system there is, the side of the will, like it's still a plot to make decisions that the people themselves should be making. They're making it for us without our consent.
Right.
So regardless of what republicanism is, or what people call themselves liberal or Democrat, I mean, it's all blind. Because like they're still wanting someone to control them. It's all about self-sustainability.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think in anarchist society, Republicans, Democrats, these are all natural trains of thought in people. But then in anarchist society, you'd have Democrats creating Democrat organizations. You'd have Republicans creating Republican organizations that run on those philosophies. But they don't force those philosophies on each other.
Oh, they used to be the same too.
And they did.
Democrat Republicans. They were the same.
Yeah.
Those
right.
parties.
But anarchism is where people can freely express their own view of how systems should work, and they can band together based on agreement.
And there's agreement and consensus. There's never any one person that's going to make that decision for you. Either, goddamn it, everyone in this room is in agreement on the same thing, regardless of how many hours it takes talking about it, or it's not going to happen at all.
There's a joke that goes, how many anarchists does it take to screw in a light bulb? And it's all of them. It takes one to screw it in and the rest of them to consent to it.
Get it! That was good.
Something like anarchies. I mean, I would agree. Like, it sounds like the ideal, but then don't you think there has to be like some sort of transitionary phases to get to that? You can't just immediately shift over.
Well, it's
there's always some transition.
Mao said there's no revolution without violence. So maybe that's gonna have to actually take part in to actually bring the system down that we're actually moving on.
I think there's kind of two forms
but it's
of
not.
anarchy.
But it's not focused on the chaos. That's my.
I think there's kind of two forms of anarchy. There's the anarchy that like Josh was talking about, where we all consent on what's going on.
The natural.
But then, in absence of consent, there's that vacuum that Josh was describing earlier, which honestly is where conflict belongs. And I think oftentimes what's wrong with democracy, republicanism, things like that, is it tries to stop conflict when conflict is exactly what needs to be going on.
Yeah.
Not necessarily violence, but some kind of argument, debate, figuring things out to where they're mutually beneficial. Instead of like our current system that just like, no, it's going to be this way. And like, sure, like the solution is quick, but is the solution necessarily utilitarian? Is it necessarily beneficial to the whole group of people?
Right?
Or is it right?
You don't know because they don't allow any other option. You take it and you never know if it's right or not because if you disagree, you get
right.
Because they still want their
power.
power.
And so, in my view, it's kind of like the state takes that vacuum and just makes it into something just for the sake of it, like just for the sake of like any conflict or whatever. And it's not even. It's not even for the sake of getting conflict. It's for the sake of the ruler, coming out on top. And in order to do that, he has to like end conflict to show that he has some kind of legitimacy.
Yeah, you have to have at least an air of legitimacy. I mean, that's why you have some things like murder is illegal, theft is illegal. But if you look at the consequences you pay for murder of an individual compared to what you pay for treason. Or what Bradley Manning is paying, for being a child, for not hurting anybody. But then you have like those guys in Iraq who went house to house and killed all those people. They get discharged, they get paid, they don't got to go to jail. So right away you can see that there's no morality to it. The state makes the morality because whatever is right is what furthers the existence of the state, and not what's good for humanity. So that's the moral. I don't want
fucking fiber. That's the goddamn that's the fiber of it all.
Yeah. I'm telling you. I have a couple more. I don't want to run into anybody's time.
How about well, we've ate up your time. We need to get it.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
How about the taking the word part?
What do you mean?
Oh, he's talking about anarchy.
What's prefixing?
Oh, without.
Yeah.
And without state, without structure.
Not really.
But that doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be any kind harmony with the natural.
Yeah. Well,
It's without ruler, not without rules.
There you go.
Just because there's no ruler, what did it say about the rules?
It means they're agreed on.
The natural
But,
rules of society, the natural law.
Okay.
Go ahead, man.
Did you have something you want to
I
say?
got a few more.
No, it's just I'm thinking about lessons and teaching.
Oh, okay.
Oh man,
I'm thinking about
always.
Yeah, so I'm just using another example. It's not from United States history. If statism can be justified as the People's Republic, the People's Liberation Army of China, how can the people ask for freedom and subsequently kill themselves for asking for freedom? So the whole justification is saying, we're here to liberate you, we're the people's army. Whether it's communism, communist statism, or whether it's democracy, the only will of the people is the individual, as the collective consensus, and it's not what the government tells you the will of the people is.
Which is the consciousness, collective consciousness, what they truly need.
And then, so the rest of this is really just stuff that we already talked about in the conversation, which is better. I get really nervous, so I type up what I'm going to say so I don't forget it. But, this is just according to the categorical imperative, taking into consideration with what Cicero says in the De Legibus and Natural Law, is whatever serves to unite humanity. Statism is, the direct opposite. Statism sets up states, sets up division between people, creates war, creates conflict. That's not necessarily a beneficial conflict. It's not a conflict of ideas. It's a conflict of death. It's a conflict of rape of resources. It's a conflict of unequal distribution of land.
Well,
and exactly. Everything that ought to be earned is robbed from us, and that's how the state flagrantly violates natural law. The very idea, the very basic precept. There's really only one. And,
they want to let us know that. You see all through TV, the news. They want to let us know that they're doing this to us.
And I think
it's just that people aren't really thinking deeper into why they're so blunt about it.
It's just basic programming.
Oh, no, it truly is. It truly is. But
you show more of it, you become numb. You don't care anymore.
So,
which is kind of scary.
Question: if you were to use natural law to transition from the current to this ideal state, what example within nature can you use to do that?
There's no beaver king.
I'm just saying.
Beavers make dams for the benefits of themselves. Robins construct their own nests.
I wouldn't agree with that, but
because
I'm just saying, I've heard that this might take a revolution, this might take violence, but then I think that's too grandiose at a scale because is there even a model that can be
Freetown. Have you heard of Freetown?
No.
Freetown, it's in Europe. I could tell you the exact all I know right now is Freetown because I haven't even thought about it in a long time. But it's an actual anarchist society.
Gotcha.
And they actually there's probably more than 120 people. 150 people.
The other thing too is
they take care of themselves without buying it.
Well, you have the EZLN and Chiapas, Mexico. They set up their own kind of collective, and he says that it's not really his will to fight with the Mexican state or even to declare independence from the state, but really to just kind of get them to leave them alone. And because according to the Mexican Constitution, land is distributed to the poorest class of people, just so they can live. Typically it's the worst land. The best land goes to the people who are affiliated with governments and people who get those special benefits, and the worst land goes to the poorest people. And then when they enacted NAFTA in 1994, they rewrote the Mexican Constitution and took that land away so they could sell it to corporations. And so you have the EZLN, which is really just trying to adhere to the Constitution agreed upon after the Mexican Revolution that Emiliano Zapata fought for, and just to get the land back. But the problem is with that is because corporatism And this new mercantilism all around the world is so strong that the only place that you can really have an anarchistic society is in a place that has no natural resources, really nothing of value. You kind of have to be, like in a secluded place, like high up in the mountains.
Well, I guess I'd draw a comparison because usually nature will find a way to inhabit an area regardless of the situation. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, can that be also said of an anarchistic type of organization, such as what's going on here? Because yes, there's models across the world, but then it's not like we fully understand the model unless we truly create it. So, in order to really get other people to understand, and this is where I was thinking about lessons and like teaching, because you have to have a concrete model, and even if it's done on the smallest scale of an organization living within a social system, I think it's entirely possible. I mean, there's so many opportunities, even if it is within a capitalist democratic republic.
You mean like a kibbutz?
I don't even know what that is.
It's like a communist.
Yeah, it's a Jewish like purely communally communist
Israel.
Israel.
But I'm just saying, like living in within, I guess, the rules of their game, because there are no rules in nature.
Dude, you can't escape it, bro.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can't escape it, so like, you can work with it.
But you could do the best you can, for instance, what Black Cat's doing. It's direct action to let them know that we can take care of themselves, just like what he was talking about.
Can we truly take care of ourselves right now?
But see, that's the question.
Right now we can't. No, I think your criticism is valid. I don't think that we need any kind of like violent overthrow of the government or anything like that. I think what we need to do is figure out the problem you're talking about. We can't take care of ourselves. That's what we need to figure out: is how do we take care of ourselves? How do you transition into this? So it's not something that we can really like jump into as individuals. It takes a mass consciousness and it takes a mass practice.
Yep.
But as far as like you're asking about examples, I think if we look at like cooperatives and credit unions and community land trusts and labor unions and tenant unions and all this stuff, the free territory of Christiania.
I know that
co-op city in the Bronx, but even in the biological level, you can look at stigmergy in the biological world, which is like ants forming lines without being told to do so, or just by releasing pheromones and knowing that it's beneficial to follow that line because the rest of the group is going to something that is full of resources that they can go harvest or things like that they can bring back to their colony, and just the forming of colonies and things like that. I think what really gives people power is the ability to form these kinds of social relationships that bind us into. I was reading a book called Why We Cooperate, and it's written by this, I believe, Palestinian, not in Pakistani, I always forget this too, but this doctor who studies chimpanzee and gorilla babies as well as human babies, and like he says the differences and why they the ways they cooperate and why. And his whole argument throughout the book is that humans establish a we. So like when you create a relationship with someone, there's kind of a we that exists there, which is why you kind of get your feelings hurt when you're like hanging out with someone and they just leave without saying bye. Things like that. That we is broken. So like that we exists in all social animals. And it's just about kind of harnessing that, which is already there, and trying to move past, the other things that might be there but aren't beneficial.
Okay, I guess that kind of sums it up, because I was just kind of wondering, what kinds of natural instances would you take in our current situation to move forward into the ideal?
Well, if you were to consult Kropotkin or Marx on the subject, they would tell you that cooperation and mutual aid is a part of the primitive structure of man. So it was the first structure, cooperation and mutual aid, and that's like the primary principles of anarchism. And I think the best modern example that we have today is Argentina. Argentina actually was very opportunistic in the way that it went about its revolution, because because they actually had an economic collapse. And there were all these, factories that were unused and workers that were unemployed, and so the workers went back in the factories and started them up again and started co-ops. And they had like these huge federations of co-ops nationwide.
No bosses.
They could go on strike if they wanted to. They could, for any reason. Like if their country was going to war, for example, the whole country could be on standstill because of these cooperative and union federations that are
have that collective consciousness. There's no one in charge as well, you know what I'm saying? It's like everyone has their little piece of the pie, and that's safe.
It's a very decentralized democratic system.
And that might happen here. That's probably one. I think there's two ways anarchy can come to pass, but one of them is collapse.
Yeah, of course.
And what, the information we have comes off the media, which is all bullshit.
Of course.
Across this nation now, there's a mass movement of sustainability, off the grid, that kind of shit. That's all anarchy. And the big movements in Tennessee, especially Vermont, New Hampshire, it starts with a piece of land. You're going to need 40, 50, 80 acres. And then they start developing, getting off the grid. They start feeding themselves first. That's a major deal.
That's the most important.
The state right now is in a huge quandary. They don't know what the hell they're going to do about it. The state always comes against anarchy. In World War II, the Barcelona anarchic movement, which is the most successful anarchy that's ever existed. That's the one thing that Churchill, Roosevelt, Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco could agree on. Destroy Barcelona.
Damn right.
And they were against each other.
Right. But they were all agreed on Barcelona. Kill those sons.
It's true.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
it makes sense to me.
So the fact that these sustainability, Black Cats is moving towards sustainability. I don't quite know how we're going to get there, but there are plenty of damn models in this country.
It's just about like Chow was talking about earlier. Actually, he's talking about we need to practice it within what's here already, and just kind of grow it.
And progressively, and maybe not even too rapidly either.
Right.
Because
exactly.
people got to truly understand what they're getting into before they're going to commit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So because all of this understanding, whether it be metaphysics that we talk about or straight direct action to create an anarchist society, people, it's just like going to an ignorant person and trying to tell them all these facts, but they got this little belief structure and it doesn't really comprehend, and they want to fight you like we were talking about earlier. So the best thing to do is just slowly get this information out, just like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And grow.
Create a culture.
And collapse is the catalyst.
Oh yeah.
Black Cat right now has over 100 members. 90 of them that doesn't give a shit. but as this society collapses, those people are going to start saying, "Oh shit."
Oh, they have the right idea. I better start hanging around them. It's I told you come door. Door is wide open.
I think this is good discussion, but I think you should probably give Josh time to finish.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think according to the natural law theory, you can't justifiably use violence to start the anarchist revolution. It's really more of a battle for the hearts and the minds of the people. If you use violence, your justification is no better than justification used by the state.
Yeah.
So if you want to succeed, and if you want to take and keep the moral high ground, you have to fight for people's minds and people's consciousness and persuade them what's right. If you kill a man, this son's gonna come back and kill you, and you're not gonna get any. That's my perspective on it. Why does it matter? Violations of the natural law are not met by jail time, as I said, but it's much worse. You have war, you have slavery, you have general misery. It's before the printing press, people had no idea how bad they had it because they were kept in ignorance. And that's kind of the analogy that I'm trying to allude to here. Is it's the opportunity cost that we pay. We don't know how successful we can be. We can try on this level to live within society and develop on the morals that we have. But as far as what we can do with it and how successful we can be, we can't know because we're robbed of our resources. We're robbed of our potential before we can use it. And that's why it matters. And anarchism is an international, it's a global movement. Like Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And if I said before that if the revolutionaries in France, came over to Spain during the Spanish Revolution, the outcome may have been completely different. It's an international revolution. It's not to be recognized by people. It's to be recognized by humanity. I mean, we're trying to break down that division.
It's good to have that network too.
Yeah, exactly, and to keep it up. So in this anarchist, we adhere only to the moral law and to the betterment of man. We must end suffering for all to produce and advance in humanity. After all, Gandhi said, an unjust law is no law at all. And it's our duty as moral human beings to adhere to and to promulgate the natural law. And whoever they vote for, we are ungovernable. We are, I think I have one more sums it up. We can see that the state is the antithesis of morality. It's the primary agent of the retardation of humanity. Anarchy has a moral authority as it is impossible to please all the whims of all men at all times simultaneously by positive law. The only thing that we can agree on is that it's wrong to take from anybody else, it's wrong to rob anybody else of their property or of their life. We are not nations, we are not a race, we are not citizens, we are not subjects, and nor are we servants. We are people. We are free, we are individuals, and it is our right on the moral authority of natural law exercised only through anarchy to exist in any way we choose and to enrich into a better society. That's it.
Absolutely.
You promoted a very intense discussion. So
It's true.